My name is Sherry Guess, and this is the Heavily Meddled Podcast. On this podcast, I interview patients, medical professionals, and industry insiders, having important discussions regarding the all too commonly experienced but lesser identified symptoms of hypersensitivity to metals contained in implanted medical and dental hardware, diet, and environments. These metals often cause a variety of dysfunctional immune responses, chronic pain, and other syndromes that fly under the radar of most patients and physicians. During these interviews, the patients and I discuss ideas for managing symptoms, share personal lifestyle modifications, and talk about how to advocate with and educate providers pre- and post-surgery, along with options found for implant removal and the how-to of adverse event reporting. This podcast does not give medical advice. From time to time, I may interview medical professionals that render personal opinions you can use to follow up with your individual provider. Let's roll. Hello, metalheads, and welcome to the jungle. Thanks for coming back for this episode of the Heavily Meddled Podcast. Today, we have my new friend, Mark, all the way from the other side of the world in Christchurch, New Zealand. Thanks, Mark, for coming on to talk to us about spine surgery and metal allergy and the huge amount of advocacy work that you're doing. I'm super excited to have you here.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So why don't you tell us just a little bit about who you are before we get into the sickness and the illness and the symptoms? Tell us who you are and what you do in New Zealand, what you used to do for work, what you like to do for a hobby. Right. Help us get to know you a little bit.
I had a pretty idyllic childhood. It was just a great, happy childhood. It was absolutely wonderful. I started reacting to vaccines when I was about 13, 14 years old. But, of course, I had doctors telling me that, no, it's not possible. It would resolve itself after 9 months. The same thing happened every time. It only happened on years I had vaccines. It upset my work life. So I've had a lot of jobs. In my 20s, I settled for just getting any job because I knew that one day these symptoms might come again, and what's the point in trying to get a career? I was a production manager at a factory. I never started off in high positions, but usually after a few weeks of being employed, they'd recognise my intelligence. I'd be pulled up. I've been production manager of a food factory, leading hand in the kitchen at Ernest Adams as well. I've been a mortgage broker, financial consultant, a bricklayer, a barman, and a real estate agent, most recently.
That's fascinating. What do you like to do for fun?
I'm still a bit too sick to have too much fun at the moment, just because I'm suffering from cortical bone cement. But I like to do a bit of stone carving. I like doing things around the house, building, making furniture. With my first implant allergy, a friend of mine who was off work and was a cabinet maker, he taught me how to become a cabinet maker. So I like doing things with wood and all sorts of stuff.
You live in one of the most beautiful countries in the whole world. I'm so jealous. That's bucket list. Nice. I got to go there. Do you like the outdoors? Do you like to be out in the woods?
Well, my life hasn't really gone that way just because of my life and my health. I would have loved to. There has been times in the past where I've just gone out with someone who was doing pest control for the local council, would go off into the woods and stuff for the night and things like that. But I love kayaking. I did that when I was younger, before my first accident. I'd love to do all that stuff again. It's just I can't.
Today, hopefully we'll get there. You started to touch on your allergies. Why don't you go back to your first known recollection with metal hypersensitivity and kind of tell us how that came forward?
I had a happy childhood as a great kid. Mum said that I've always been regarded as highly intelligent. I've had multiple doctors asked if they could write letters to say how intelligent I was in my file, and it was strange. I said no because I just didn't see the point. But one of them insisted, and she did. So I've always been considered a pretty smart fella, able to do anything at all. My first year at high school, I was in the top class. Everyone in school had to have the Hep B vaccination, and it was to be given at school. It was a course of 4 injections. I had the first injection and I was walking back to class and something just didn't feel right, but I just sort of shook it off. A month later, after the second injection, I knew there was something definitely wrong. My brain was not working how it should. All of a sudden, it was noisy. It used to be quiet. There was nothing. And suddenly, I could hear my own thoughts. I could hear old memories. It was just so crazy. And I told Mum, look, I says, I think these vaccines have affected me. And she said, well, ring the doctor, make an appointment. And so I rang the doctor, made an appointment, went to see the doctor, told the doctor all that. The doctor told me that's impossible for the vaccines to cause any problems. He says the vaccines just stay on the arm muscle and they don't get distributed around the body, or definitely not into the brain. So you should have the third injection. I said to him, look, it's pretty obvious it's the vaccines. And he says, you may be in the top class at school, but if you think that you know more than a doctor who's been through medical school, then maybe you shouldn't be. I went back, stupidly enough, I had the third injection, and that made everything a lot worse and full on. And I also started feeling really tired. After that, I thought, right, I can't have the fourth one. So the day that was scheduled, I just bunked the day off school.
How many are there? 4?
There were 4. Yeah.
Gracious.
Unfortunately, the school sent a letter home to Mum. He hasn't had his last injection. You need to take him into the hospital. So Mum just took me into the hospital. I got that injection. And from then on, I couldn't sleep at all. I was so tired all the time. I was just so fatigued. I was trying to go to school. When I'm lying in bed trying to sleep, it would sound like there was a whole crowd of people in my head. Every now and again, I would focus on one of the voices and I could hear what it was. It was all the things I'd heard during the day, all different people talking that I'd come in contact with and heard, all happening at once. And it was just really strange. And I eventually just came right by myself. About 6 months later, the fatigue stopped. And I was put on strong sleeping pills as well then at that age. They said it wasn't the vaccine, it can't be. Well, I got better. That was fine. The following year, I wasn't in the top class, obviously, because the last 3 months of school wasn't there much at all. I was in the second top. I preferred that. Then a few years later, I had another vaccine. I think it was a flu vaccine. It gave me neurological issues. I didn't have fatigue or anything like that, but I had elevated emotions, basically the dysfunction of the executive functions of the brain. I was at school, but I was euphoric, basically. Also, I could hear old memories, and I wasn't having any trouble sleeping, but I didn't need sleep. I wasn't tired. I wasn't fatigued. It was just strange. Once I left school and had flu injections, I'd quit my job. It was usually about 30 days after vaccination. I'd quit my job. I'd just party for about 9 months. Then it would wear off and I'd suddenly crash and just get depressed and I couldn't do a thing. I'd just lie in bed and then I'd come right and I'd be fine about 11 months after the vaccine was given to me. And every time I got a flu vaccine after that, exactly the same thing happened. Now, I was being told that it was mental illness, which was strange, because it didn't even match what they were saying. Once it wore off, I was back to my normal self. I was back to being considered an incredibly smart person. Once I realized myself that it was the same time every year that it was happening, and this is after, 15 years, the same symptoms, euphoria, executive dysfunction, couldn't budget money, I'd go out and party for 9 months. After so many years, it seemed obvious that it was being caused by something, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same time every year, same symptoms, it lasts the same amount of time, everything was the same. It's got to be the vaccines for sure. So I thought, well, I'm going to go get another vaccine. I'm going to see if it happens this time. Because being euphoric is fun, let's face it. I had a good time. So I went out and got another one. And sure enough, the same thing happened. So I went to my doctor, and I said, look, it's definitely the vaccines, isn't it? I've just had another one to prove it. And he sent me to a psychiatrist. And I told the psychiatrist, see, look, all of these problems, they're caused by the vaccines. I was rewarded with a diagnosis of a somatic disorder and told it's not
My
possible. My
second guest with a metal allergy told they have a psychosomatic disorder. Yep.
Yeah. and not a psychosomatic, a somatic disorder.
Okay.
There is a
How is
difference,
that
but
different? Yeah, please tell me what that
well,
difference is.
a somatic disorder is that you're overreacting to your health.
Okay. All right.
A psychosomatic disorder is it's all in your head. But the thing
Okay.
is they use the terms interchangeably.
Okay.
When they say somatic disorder, they'll treat you as though it's all in your head, not just that you're overreacting. But it's just a way so they can stop in your healthcare.
Hmm.
I was reminded again, it's impossible. Vaccines stay in the arm, they don't get distributed around the body. Now, back when I was 15 and had the first flu injection, that's when I became allergic to latex gloves, and I also became allergic to antiperspirant. And it's the aluminium and antiperspirant I'm allergic to. The under my arms and my shirts would all turn yellow. So it's just an interesting thing to note. Now,
Is there aluminum in the latex gloves as well?
I don't know. I haven't found out yet. I
Okay.
don't know the connection there with latex, but yeah, that's when I
Okay.
started.
That could
That's
just
when
be
I
an immune
started being
system
allergic.
reaction, right? If your immune
Well,
system's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, exactly. The funny thing about the latex allergy, the latex gloves would turn yellow, just how my underarms and my shirts would turn yellow. And of course, being a teenager, there's other things that teenagers use which are made out of latex. When they're chasing the opposite sex, they would turn yellow as well and leave a bit of a rash.
Oh no.
I'm Yeah, yeah. So, given a somatic disorder, even though I found out it was the vaccines causing it, it was just so obvious. And I did the test vaccine. I stopped having them and I was fine. I never had those problems again. A couple of years later, I was working as a bricklayer and I started eating tuna every day. And I was eating 2 to 3 tins a day. Back then, metal allergy just wasn't heard of. You just didn't know about that kind of thing. I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. I went to the doctor. This is the first time I found out how corrupt the place is. The doctor says, oh, well, perhaps it's this, perhaps it's that. Maybe you've got a gluten intolerance. Maybe it's all of the bread you're eating and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, well, I'll try stopping gluten and see if that helps with the chronic fatigue syndrome. And I went to leave. But just as I was about to leave his office, he whispered to me, he says, Mercury. He says, stop eating tuna. He didn't put it in my records. He was scared to put it in my records. He was scared to talk about it in a normal tone of voice. So just as the psychiatrist had diagnosed me for a somatic disorder, even though I can prove by taking a vaccine that it's the vaccine causing those problems,
Right.
this other guy's scared. He's scared to talk about how mercury can cause problems. I went home. I stopped eating gluten. No, that didn't help. Stopped eating the tuna. Yep, I was fine. I had chronic fatigue syndrome gone in 3 weeks. I found out recently the human body can only process 1 tin a week. So 2 to 3 tins a day was a bit overdoing it.
Yeah.
5 is when I had my first accident at work and needed back surgery. I just slipped over working as a bricklayer. Couldn't catch myself, sort of like a banana skin type slip. And the pain was just shocking. I tried walking it off, tried lying down for a while, nothing would happen. I went round to my partner's house. She was trained as a nurse, and she says, I think you've got a prolapsed disc. So I just went to the local sports med doctors, and they said, no, you won't have a prolapsed disc. You can't take back pain lying down. You need to do physio.
Yeah.
So, okay. I started doing physio and it just made me worse. My boss even told me, look, every time you do physio, you're worse. The next day, you're bloody hopeless. So I went back to the doctor, told him that, oh, we'll get a scan. Oh, look, yeah, I've got a prolapsed disc. You need a fusion. So I was sent to the surgeon. That was done. I had the surgery. Now, before the surgery, the surgeon told me he was putting a titanium implant in me. Now, I assumed he meant it was a pure titanium implant. He didn't say it was an alloy. He just said titanium. And so I said to him, look, I've had problems with metals in the past. So I just want to know if there's any chance that it could cause any problems for me. Could I be allergic to it? He says, we're told to tell people that it's 100% biocompatible. Obviously, I know now that titanium's an antigen, so it's not actually possible for it to be 100% biocompatible. The surgery went ahead. It was a success as far as it fixed the problem. I was in no more pain. After the operation, I was in surgical pain, of course. Left hospital a few days later. A few days after that, stopped taking the painkillers, and as I was in no pain, felt good, started doing things. Then my blood pressure started doing strange things. I couldn't stand up. Every time I stood up, I fainted. I rang my doctor. They said call an ambulance. So I called the ambulance. The ambulance people were shocking. That's another story. Nothing really came out of it, and it sort of resolved itself. Rest resolved it. But then I emptied my bowels 6 to 8 times a day. I was just feeling terrible. And I just had to stop doing things and start resting again. And it came right again. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm fine. So I had my last appointment with the surgeon. I said, I think I'm ready to go back to work now because it was fine. The bowel problems had stopped. The problems with my blood pressure had stopped. And I went back to work. A week and a half of working as a bricklayer, I went downhill again. It's definitely my metabolism was bringing on the symptoms. Every time I rested, I got better. Every time I did exercise, I got worse. So I had to stop work a week and a half afterwards. I started developing more and more symptoms as time went by. I got vertigo, inappropriate responses to temperature. I was always cold all the time. In the middle of summer, I'd have to wear thermal underwear, thermal top, thermal long pants. Yes. Visual disturbances. If I was driving down the road and I had to stop at lights, somehow it made like everything I was looking at just start jerking. And it felt like I was going to have a bloody seizure or something. And I just have to lie down and just wait for the traffic light to change, and just lie on the front seat with my eye looking up. And once I got moving again, it would come right. I would get sudden fatigue, difficulty breathing, and I'd have to lie down. I'd get paralysis. I'd be unable to move. I'd just have to lie there and just concentrate on breathing. But it happened every day. That was one of the last symptoms I got. I had balance issues. If I ate chicken, it wouldn't digest at all. Yet my protease levels were fine. Everything I ate with the chicken also wouldn't digest. It was just really bizarre. Loss of smell. If I ate food with titanium dioxide or medications, they would make my mouth burn. Brain fog. Eventually, 2.5 years later, my face looked swollen. Looked a greenish black colour around my eyes. I was 53 kg. I looked like I was about to drop dead. There was one time I went in the Ham hot pools, the sulphur pools. Now that day my tongue, it just turned black. I had amalgam fillings. Vera told me eventually that my implant,
Explain, Vera.
Professor Vera Stayscale, the inventor of the ELISA test, I got in touch with her in 2006 because all of the doctors were ignoring. When I went to specialists, I'd tell them, look, it's from the surgery. And they would purposely say, no, it's nothing to do with surgery. And so that's when I contacted Vera. And I was in touch with her for a few years. She diagnosed me in 2008, and she said that my implant had a galvanic reaction with my amalgam fillings, and I had to get them removed as well. They caused a burning mouth, which was different to the burning I got from eating things with titanium dioxide in. If I had medications, it was different. And if I ate it, I'd get burning eyes and nose as well. I didn't get that just with the mercury burning. I was looking pretty sick. Now, the surgeon who put the implant in me, he did not want to remove it. He did not want to accept that my downturn in health was anything to do with his surgery.
Let me pause for just a second. You knew it was from the surgery, but did you know it was from the metal? Had you already put that together?
Yes, the surgery was in 2005. I contacted Professor Vera Stayscale in the start of 2006. From my talking to her and from my history and everything, it was pretty obvious. And I knew it was the metal. When you have an adverse event, it's not questionable. You know you've had it.
Did you get a ELISA test?
No, I didn't at the time. No, I just got a clinical diagnosis.
Have you had one since?
No. The problem with New Zealand is we're too far away to get the ELISA test. I tried getting it in 2020 by flying overseas. So anyway,
you go back to the surgeon.
He didn't want to take it out. I was just sent around all these other specialists. Now, I was sent to one guy in particular. Well, first of all, I had a GP tell me, oh, no, you've just got irritable bowel syndrome. That's your only problem. And it wasn't, because that didn't explain any other symptoms.
Right.
So I looked in the phone book. I contacted the Oxford Clinic. They specialise in irritable bowel syndrome. And I spoke to one of the nurses there, and she says, you definitely haven't got irritable bowel syndrome, but you need to see someone. And she made me an appointment with a doctor, a specialist up there. And I saw him, and he was incredibly concerned. And he said, look, I think we need to order you a red blood cell scan and a full body scan. He says, actually, I might ring right now and see if they can do it this afternoon, because it's not used very often. Just as he was about to pick up the phone, he said to me, who's your surgeon? I says, oh, and I told him the surgeon's name. And instead of ringing to book the scan, he rang my surgeon instead while I was sitting there. He was only on the phone to him for about 20 seconds, hung up the phone, and he told me, you've got irritable bowel syndrome, get out of my office. I left, went home. A few hours later, I got a phone call from that nurse at the Oxford Clinic. She says, look, I don't know what's going on, but someone is trying to stop you getting help. She says, you need to keep fighting. And that was it. Wow. And then about 10 months later, I was sent to a infectious diseases specialist.
Uh-huh.
Now, Mum came along to that appointment. I can't remember if my wife did, but Mum did. And we talked to him about everything. I told him how the nurse, everything I've told you, I've told him. And he says, oh, I think there's some funny business going on as well. You're obviously pretty sick. He said, look, I tell you what, I'll order a red blood cell scan and a full body scan. He says, that's not going to prove you're allergic, but it might just pick something up and give you a reason to demand it be removed. And that's what happened. The scan came back showing increased tracer activity around the bolts, and that was enough to demand to get removed. Okay. So I was sent back to the surgeon who put it in, and he still didn't want to remove it. And my mum and my partner were there, and they were starting to say, oh, come on, he's obviously bloody sick. But suddenly, it's like he snapped. He sort of put his hands on his head and went forward and started talking in like a toddler's voice. And he was going, oh, stop. It was just really weird. Anyway, the next day I rang ACC, the funders of the surgery, and I asked for another surgeon. I said, look, I told them what happened, and I said, I don't think this guy's fit for surgery. But they got back to me and said, sorry, but it's either him or no one. The day of surgery, I was lying in a room at the hospital. He came storming into the room, really angry. You could see it built up in him. You still want everything removed? And, well, of course, and he stormed out again. A few minutes later, a friend of ours came in, or a friend of ours' father. He worked there, he's an anesthesiologist. I told him, I'm a bit worried about this guy. He's really angry. And he told me, look, don't worry, I'm in the operating theatre next door. I'll pop my head in every now and again to make sure everything's going all right. He was just trying to reassure me.
Sure.
He obviously couldn't help me. I went into the surgery looking like I was about to drop dead. When I woke up from surgery, my face was back to normal. I looked normal. I didn't have the green black circles around my eyes. It was just amazing. I had family members who I hadn't seen since Christmas. They couldn't believe it when they were told.
And what exactly did they do in this surgery?
In the surgery, they had to remove the implant and the Wallace prosthesis. Wallace prosthesis, that came out easy.
I don't know what that is. Could you explain to people what that is?
It's just something that they put around your spine if there looks like there's some degeneration of a disc that doesn't need surgery now, but might cause problems in the future.
So that was at an upper level, and they put that around for extra support. Yeah,
and I think L5S1 was where the fusion was. Okay. So there were 4 bolts going in and 2 rods.
Okay.
But when he removed it, the problem is that they didn't have the right screwdriver.
You go into surgery and not have the right screwdriver?
Well, the wrong one was put in the surgical pack. So he had to leave the operating theatre and search for some old screwdrivers, and they tried using them even though they were the wrong ones, and they ended up stripping the heads of one of the bolts. In the end, they had to get an osteotome and hammer, and they had to cut each rod and then hammer them round until they were loose enough to undo by hand. After surgery, when I woke up, I was in a huge amount of pain. A lot of time had gone by as well, and I wondered why on earth so much time had gone by before I was put back in my room. They said, after surgery, you said you were hungry, and we gave you a sandwich, and you were just throwing up for hours and hours. I had no memory of anything. But I was in a huge amount of pain, my sacroiliac joints, my perineum. I felt like I'd been hit by a bus. Although I looked better and most of my systemic symptoms had gone, there was still something very, very wrong and something new. My body started jerking as well, get like myoclonic jerks, like, just your hand would go, your arm or your leg. I still had burning in my mouth. I still had my fillings. I still had the problem with inappropriate responses to temperature. I had a new symptom, claustrophobia. It's another new symptom. I didn't find out till a few weeks later. It was rather strange.
I want to make sure I'm following. So you go into surgery, you have the fusion hardware removed. A lot of those symptoms are gone, but now you wake up with new pain and different symptoms. And you can tell the difference.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
The next day I was given the implant that they took out. Where they'd cut the rods, you could see that all some tiny bits had come off and they're left in my back. My other idea was, well, maybe he's sabotaged the operation. He's put a foreign object in me. I went home, I was given some strong painkillers for the first week or so. I immediately started putting on weight. I wasn't eating any more than usual. After the painkillers that they gave me to take home wore off, I went back onto codeine. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't lie down on my back. I couldn't stand in one spot. I couldn't lie down on my side with my legs bent. I'd have to sleep on my side with my legs dead straight, which is very hard. Not easy.
I can imagine that.
Yeah. The most comfortable thing for me to do was to walk all day, just taking small little steps. Not big steps, just small little steps, just walk around the house. And I could slowly do things like I could dry dishes. I just kept moving. I couldn't wash dishes because that would mean I'd have to stand in one spot. And no one was helping me. I changed doctor, got a new doctor who specialised in palliative pain care. And she was really good and she tried getting me help, but she knew these specialists just didn't want to take responsibility for an implant that caused a problem. I was now being seen by specialists for all the pain. They just didn't want to get involved. It was obvious to my doctor what was going on. The pain symptoms were nerve pain, basically from just above my waist, from the sacroiliac joints down to the soles of my feet, was just screaming with pain 24 hours a day. It was just a living hell. I couldn't sleep. In order to get to sleep at night, I'd have to run a bath that was so hot it would burn my skin and take me a few minutes just to get in. That would block the pain and give me half an hour pain-free. I could get to sleep. But then within 4 hours, I'd be awake in absolute pain again. I'd have to get up out of bed, take painkillers, and it was just like that for years. Then they did a scan because I said, look, I reckon some's been left in me, some fragments. They did a plain X-ray. The radiographer who did the X-ray, we were talking to her and I says, they're just looking for fragments. And she says, there is. And I says, you sure? Because you sure it's not just the Fidji cage? But when we got the radiologist's report back, it said there was no metal in me. And they were blatantly lying to me. I rang the hospital. I said, look, is it possible for a foreign object to have ended up in me? They said, no, it's not possible anymore because of our processes. They says everything that goes into an operating theatre gets written down on a list at the end of surgery. When everything gets taken out, gets written on a list. They compare the two. They know if something's missing. But you see, my surgeon had to leave the operating theatre to get more screwdrivers. Later in 2020, it was discovered that a foreign object had been left in front of my spine. And
that's why you woke up with these new symptoms.
Especially the myoclonic jerks. I was sent to a specialist for that, and when I told him, he just said to me, don't be so ridiculous.
And a foreign body that was left was metal also.
Yeah, that was only removed recently in 2020. Life was a living hell with that pain for about 6 years. That's when I started getting cortisone injections in my back. I had to get them every 3 months and they would get rid of the pain. I still had to be careful. I got a job. I trained as a real estate agent. That was still probably one of the only jobs I could do because I could manage my own day. It's not a job where I'm sitting down all day. There's not much standing still involved. And
trust me, I know about
it's
this.
busy, but just after me and my wife broke up, it was just too much. I fractured a vertebrae and I got taken to the hospital. I was in so much pain when it happened. Helping someone else put a trailer on the back of a vehicle, but it was fully loaded, been sitting in the rain all night, and we heard an almighty crack. And I went to the hospital. They did a plain x-ray. And they, no, there's nothing wrong with you. Probably just a back sprain. I says, no. I says, I need an MRI or something. I said, I've broken it again. But no, they wouldn't do anything. A couple of months later, through my doctor, I got an MRI, and sure enough, I'd fractured a vertebrae with bone edema, and it just wasn't healing. I was still able to work, but I had to be careful. I couldn't work my usual hours. I had to stop prospecting. I got sent to a surgeon, and I was going to have surgery. So I just had to try and wind things down at work.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Attention metalheads. Are you struggling with skin rashes, joint and systemic pain, or fatigue that just won't go away? Type 4 metal allergy is often overlooked as a culprit in many of today's chronic illnesses. Get to the root of the problem with MILISA testing. MILISA is a scientifically proven and clinically validated test that measures immune reactivity to metal allergens like nickel, cobalt, and titanium. With fast and reliable results, you can get the answers you need to find relief and live a healthier life. Don't let metal allergies control your life any longer. Visit melisa.org to learn more and schedule your test. Trust us, you'll be glad you did. MILISA, a valuable diagnostic tool in medicine.
Now, in between all this, I developed epilepsy in 2012.
And no prior history of seizures ever.
No, never. The only thing is after that, 2008 surgery, I had myoclonic jerks, right? They got worse and worse and worse. 2012, I started having nocturnal tonic-clonic seizures, the kind you can die from. You can have SUDEP from sudden death in epilepsy. There's another story that goes along with that. So I started having seizures. I was medication dependent. If I didn't have medication, I'd have a seizure. Also in 2014, the specialist who was giving me the cortisone injections found a fragment of metal in my back on one of the scans. And he wrote to ACC, the funders, and told them, look, we need to reassess this guy as not having chronic pain. And I never agreed with that diagnosis. So they found metal in there, but they just said it's not there. It definitely was, but no, they just wouldn't accept it. So it was left there, and we just all had to pretend it wasn't there anymore and carry on getting cortisone injections.
Wow.
I fractured my back again in 2018. I was put in for surgery for 2019. I spoke to the new surgeon, a different surgeon in a different part of the country, a different health board, and I told him about my first problem with implant allergy. So he said to me he'll try and get a metal-free implant, and he thought he had found one, a carbon fibre one. But about a week before surgery, he said, look, it's not fully carbon fibre. He said the rods, they are titanium coated in carbon fibre, but the screws are carbon fibre coated in a shell of titanium Ti6Al4V, right? Titanium alloy. And he said, so your only choice is this or a stainless steel one. I said, I don't want to try stainless steel, mate. We'll go with this. And he says, well, if it causes a problem, I promise to remove it. And he put that in writing. When I woke up from that surgery, I was on the floor and I was screaming in pain. And for a month, the pain couldn't be managed by codeine. The only way I could sleep was by having painkillers. Sleeping pills didn't work, not the dose they tried on me. Taking 4 milligrams of lorazepam just to sleep at night. They lasted about 25 days. So I ended up discharging myself from hospital just so I could manage my pain myself instead of the hospital doing it, because they had rules and I knew I could do it better. But it was still 25 days of excruciating pain I had to go through. I think it's because the fragments of metal that was cut into, probably something to do with that, I don't know. I was having a bad reaction to the bandage they used as well, the opsite bandage, the sticky see-through bandage they put over it. Got spots came up on me. Started having anaphylaxis when I got home, breathlessness. I got the same symptoms as I mentioned earlier with the first implant, the titanium symptoms, but I had all these other extra symptoms I'd never had before. The spots and the rashes and the cardiac issues. I hallucinated.
Where do you think that came from?
Well, what I did after that, my doctor wasn't going to help me, the doctor GP I had at the time, but I was in touch with Becky Dutton from Eliza Diagnostics.
Yes.
I was talking to her for a while, and she says, look, why don't you try and get a ELISA test? Because she said, look, they're not all titanium symptoms.
Sure.
So we organised to get the ELISA test. Olaf and the team, they all sat down, went through my family history and my history. Olaf said to me, these aren't all titanium symptoms. He says, you need to be tested for Cordos bone cement, allergy to that. I then saw a functional medicine doctor in New Zealand, and he went through my history, and he just couldn't believe how obvious it was. At the end of that appointment, he told me that I have to protect him. He was scared of the medical council. He brought this up and says, look, it's not that I'm wrong and they're right. He says, it's all about numbers, but I'm in danger helping you from the medical council. So I just need you to protect me. That's strange.
Oh.
So I got assessed for the ELISA test. Yes, you need to be tested for this, this, and this. And because we're too far away in New Zealand to get it, I thought I'll try and organise to do it from Sydney, Australia. It's only a 3-hour flight over there. I contacted a lab over there, spoke to the general manager, and she was cool with it. Organised with a medical centre to take the blood, organised with a courier to be on the landing strip and waiting to go, because they had to get it to Germany in under 48 hours. Never been done before from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the day I flew out to Australia was the day the COVID restrictions kicked in. They said that if you arrive before 8 o'clock at night, you're fine. Restrictions don't apply to you. So I thought I'd be fine because I was arriving at 7 p.m. at night. So I arrived, stayed the night. In the morning, went to the medical centre to get the blood taken. They wouldn't let me in to take my blood. I looked terrible. I looked really, really sick, and they were scared of COVID. I had the general manager of the path lab on the phone. She tried to organise so that I could go to her office and get it done there, but it just wasn't going to happen. The courier guys, they were on the tarmac ready to go, ringing me, but in the end, didn't happen. I had to jump on the plane and go back home.
You still, to this day, have not had a ELISA test?
No, but it's pretty obvious. We went to Bali on holiday one year. It was a mission getting over there on a flight just because of the pain and everything. Because of the pain I was in after that 2008 operation, anything around my waist was just too painful. I couldn't wear underwear. I also had pain in the back half of my testicles, but not the front half. I couldn't wear jeans. I couldn't wear denim. I had sensory symptoms in my legs.
What did you wear? A dress? A kilt?
Just tracksuit pants mainly. Because we were going over to Bali, my wife says, look, what if a bloody mosquito comes and bites you in the middle of the night? We don't want it. So we went out looking for some underwear that might be comfortable enough. We found some, and they were like a shiny pair of boxer shorts that were stretchy. They turned out to be a disaster. It turned out they're impregnated with titanium.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't find out until later. So I wake up in the middle of the night and yeah, they're like really sore and heavy. I feel like they're full of concrete. I look at them and they're like almost purple.
Oh my gosh.
I took the underwear off and within 20 minutes, the swelling went down and everything was all back to normal.
You've got to be the most sensitive patient I know to titanium. Gracious.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, they say titanium's inert, right? Bioidentical.
They say that, but it's impossible to be 100% biocompatible because it's an antigen.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you for a second just because I want you to see this part of my story, but I just had a tendon anchor removed in March from my arm with 9 years of pain. It's titanium. I am not allergic to titanium, but the doctor said this is a pure inert titanium tendon anchor. Would you like to see what this looks like?
Oh, crikey.
Does that look inert to you?
Nah, it's not inert.
I go to the PA and I said, what does the doctor think of all this corrosion on the tendon anchor? Yeah. Because they gave it back to me. She said, that's not corrosion.
Right. Okay.
To my face, that's not corrosion. I said, well, what is that? Well, we had to cauterize some blood vessels or something to get it out of there. My son used to be a blacksmith. I said, son, have you ever put metal in the fire, pure metal, and had it come out looking pitted and corroded and rusty? He's like, no, it doesn't do that. Of course, I talked to our mutual friend, Dr. Schroeder, showed him the picture, told him what the surgeon said. He's like, that's corrosion. They wouldn't have to heat up enough to do that all the way around the tendon anchor. So just
I know, just a
hogwash.
joke. I mean, it's all liability. That's all it is. That's what we're
covering their butts
up against.
So did you get the foreign body removed? Where are we now?
I just keep getting sicker and sicker, and every time I was eating, I was having an anaphylactic shock. I was having paralysis. Just moving too fast would also cause it. And of course, I had all the titanium symptoms as well, and the cardiac issues. And I had the neurological symptoms. I was like euphoric. So it was really strange being euphoric when all of this was happening.
I joke, but I will not.
I was living on raw, unprocessed milk from a local farm. I was drinking about $50 of that a week, and $50 of kefir and chips from the fish and chip shop. Everything else was too reactive. So I just kept myself alive that way. That's also when I started drinking electrolyzed water. That made me feel better, and it bought me some time, a couple of months. Now, what it did was that's how my vitamin C got low in the first place. It plummeted my vitamin C. Plummeting my vitamin C meant that my detox system wasn't working as well, and it made me feel better. But I was still pretty sick. I had a video appointment with the functional medicine doctor I saw in April 2020. He said to me, look, if you don't get this implant removed soon, I don't know if you're going to make it. He says, look, just try and relax and go with it. I says, I'm not going to relax and go with it. I says, no bloody way. I says, I'm going to fight. He says, good on you. He ended up calling my surgeon. They had a chat, and then they urgently applied for funding to remove the implant, but not the bone cement. So that was removed 10 months after it was put in. Now, since they were going to be removing it, I thought, well, I might ask the surgeon if he can take out any metal from my 2008 surgery, because I know there's metal bits in there. So I emailed him about it, and he says, well, we'd have to get a 3D scan first. So he ordered that. I had the scan, and the scan didn't mention anything about the metals. But in his request, he hadn't asked the radiologist to look for the metals. They only reported if they're told to look for it over here. I had a Zoom meeting with a surgeon and with a whole lot of administrators at the hospital, and he's trying to tell me that there's no metal fragments in me. I said, look, I know you're blatantly lying to me. I said, I know there is. I've seen them before. They've come up on scans, but that was his final word, was no metal fragments. So I just gave up on that, and I thought, oh, well. Anyway, the pre-op came up the night before the surgery to remove the implant. Me and Mum are sitting there. He walks and he says, well, he says, you were right about everything. He says, the Fiji cage from your earlier operation, it is tantalum and PEEK, not titanium, like I said. He says, but your back is also peppered with tiny fragments of metal. And he showed us on the scan. He says, they can't be removed. It just wouldn't be safe enough. They're all amongst the nerves in your back and all that kind of thing. He said, but what we also found is there's a piece of an implant in front of your spine. He showed us on the scan, zoomed in. It wasn't anywhere near my operation site. It was up in front of my solar plexus area and in front of my spine. It hadn't moved. When they move, you can tell because they leave a trail on a CT scan. This hadn't moved since it had been put there. That was obviously why I could no longer put my hands behind my head and other things. He says he doesn't know if he'll be able to remove it. He says he'll try, but he might not be able to.
Because of the anterior anatomy? The vascular stuff.
He said if he can't remove it, he'll put it in writing so I can go overseas and get it removed or something. That'd be great. So the next day I had the surgery, felt great afterwards. I was only in there one night and then I went home. I was feeling better and I started eating more, but after eating for about 4 or 5 days, I started having anaphylaxis again. By that stage, it was clear that the titanium symptoms had gone, but the bone cement symptoms were still happening, of course, because they hadn't been removed.
Let me stop you for a minute. Are there metallic components of bone cement?
Yes, so it's PMMA bone cement, and it's got alumina in it. Alumina is the precursor. It's what they use to make aluminium. It's used in composite dental fillings. Your iPhone screen is aluminosilicate. After the 2019 surgery, when it was put in, I started reacting to my iPhone screen. My fingers did.
So we can only assume then if you have a ELISA test, you would likely show positive to aluminum as well.
Yeah, the neurological issues are very much the same as from the aluminium and vaccines when I was younger.
Okay.
The euphoria.
So that was the connection to the vaccines.
Yeah, the aluminium's pretty bad. In 2019, that surgeon used the bone cement improperly for a thing that is not supposed to be used for. He was going to be putting 6 screws in my back, so he had to drill 6 holes, and then he only put 4 because he was drilling one of the middle ones, and he hit a blood vessel in my spine, in my vertebrae, and it started gushing out with blood. Now, Scott Schroeder told me, he says, when that happens, he says, they really do gush out. He says, it's not just a dribble. He said, they gush. So what the surgeon did was he got the PMMA bone cement and used that to plug the leak. So now I have this bone cement. It's in contact with my blood supply in my spine permanently. So every time I exercise, anytime I increase my metabolism, it's just releasing more and more toxins into me, and I have anaphylaxis.
Wow.
I'm a lot better now than I was. I became hypersensitive to everything, right? Or anaphylaxis does that because it's your mast cells. So having bone cement in contact with the blood supply in your spine, every time I exercise, every time I speed up my metabolism, even if I was just washing my hair in the shower, if I was doing it too fast, it would cause anaphylaxis because it would put more toxins around my blood, and I could feel it in my blood. If I ate vegetables, I'd get anaphylaxis. You could feel my blood filling with this toxic feeling suddenly afterwards. It just wasn't good. In 2020, I had the surgery to remove the implant. I was still having the symptoms from the bone cement. But what I have found out is that the surgeon, although he hasn't written it down anywhere or told me, he removed that piece from him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the surgeon that took the implant out in 2020, when I had my last appointment with him, I'd been emailing him, asking him about the letter that he was going to write saying that I have that piece of surgical rod in front of my spine. He just assumed that it was a piece of my implant that I had removed in 2007 that had accidentally been left in me. The last appointment I had with him, he told me that he would write to ACC and he would tell them about the metal fragments in my back, but that he is not going to be telling them about the other piece in front of my spine. I asked him why not, and he says, I'm just not going to. I found out a year later that it's because he removed it. He didn't put anything in the notes that it was even there or that he had found it or anything, and they now won't give me a copy of the scan or anything. Everyone's just keeping their mouths shut.
So was he covering for the other surgeon, covering for the facility, covering?
He just doesn't want to get involved. They don't want anything to do with the medical council. They're too busy. That's just what they do here. They collude. I'd say the reason he didn't put it in writing is because he removed it. And I found out later, he didn't tell me he removed it, but I did find out later he did remove it. So all the symptoms went away, including my epilepsy disappeared. A year after it was removed, I got another scan. I managed to put a bit of pressure on to see if it was still there. And no, it wasn't there. It was gone.
As if it had never been there.
Yeah. And I could put my hands behind my head, no pain here. I didn't have to have my car seat on a 45-degree angle back anymore.
But you can bend your legs when you sleep?
Yeah. I'm a lot better now. A lot. I can sleep all night. Night. I can lie down on the couch all day.
So what is the current status then? What remains in your body? What's gone? Right. What symptoms remain? Do you manage with diet? Do you manage with antihistamines?
I manage with diet.
Tell me the plan.
Antihistamines, they just won't work with the mast cells. I've basically just tried to do everything I can with diet and with what I do to try and desensitize myself to things. I have been quite successful.
Do you think you have a nickel allergy as well as titanium and aluminum?
I haven't seen any evidence for it yet.
Okay.
I really haven't. I'm not saying I haven't, but I just haven't seen any evidence.
I know what the low nickel diet is, but when you have an aluminum allergy and a titanium allergy, what does that diet look like?
Well,
what does that look like in your environment?
I just did an elimination diet. I knew for sure I couldn't eat vegetables, couldn't eat eggs. I knew what caused anaphylaxis because it happened pretty quick, and it was things.
Do vegetables have titanium?
No, it's the nutrients. It's what they do to your body when you eat them. How they get your body moving. Vegetables, phytonutrients, the nutrients from vegetables are slightly toxic to humans anyway, but they seem to just get my blood moving, get my metabolism moving faster than just meat. What I found was that if I just ate meat and fat only, all my symptoms disappeared. I just couldn't keep it up forever. What I thought was I'll try and reduce my exposure to alumina. I had white composite fillings in my mouth and they have alumina silicate in them. So I thought I'll start getting some more of those removed. I had one removed in February and that stopped the cardiac symptoms. I've still got another one to get removed. I think about 5 were getting removed all up. Doing that has really helped the neurological symptoms. It has done what I thought it was going to do. And I'm hoping it helps even more when I get the last one removed in July.
Wow. Are you still pretty much eating only the meat, or?
I eat a bit of bread with it as well, and I have a bit of spaghetti or baked beans, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what I'm having most nights. I can eat potatoes, no problem. So I have
Me too.
Chips, a ribeye steak, and some baked beans or spaghetti, and I have that every night, and that keeps me well enough.
Wow.
But I still can't do a lot because of the exercise thing. But the breathlessness came back. I had to get some more fillings put in as well because I became allergic to my toothpaste and I couldn't brush my teeth for 3 years. The top front 6 teeth all had big holes, had decayed at the top of them. So I had to get them filled, 6 of them. They used the Ceremco fillings for that. Even though they're a lot more biocompatible than anything else on the market, they still did bring some of the breathlessness back.
Still,
but not as bad as it was.
Stop for a minute, because until we talked briefly, I had never heard of them. I'm sure the podcast guests have never heard of them. Tell me about this filling and go back and tell the podcast listeners why the composite fillings, which are not mercury, were problematic.
It's the alumina in them, and the problem with those fillings is they leak. They don't get cured properly when they get put in your mouth. They actually need high heat to cure. But, of course, when you put them in your mouth, they can't use high heat. They just use one of those UV lights. That's why they're not really that biocompatible. They're always leaking. And a lot of them, if you look in the information that comes with them, they say that for the lifetime of that filling, it will release fluoride in your mouth 24 hours a day. They sell it as a feature. Bugger that. I don't want to have fluoride going into my mouth every day. Most people don't know that.
Now I got to go get all my composite fillings removed. Thanks, Mark.
So Remco fillings. They are the most biocompatible. They don't just do fillings; they do other products as well. Their aim is to be the most biocompatible.
But what are they made of?
On the market. I don't know, but all I know is I trust my dentist, and we had to give it a shot.
And how do you spell that?
Saremco. Look it up. It's
All right, we'll do that.
I'd recommend them for.
It'll be in the show notes, people.
They're great. I had to get 6 fillings of them, and because I'm a little bit sensitive to them, they brought some of the cardiac issues back, affected my heart rate a bit, but I'm still better than I was before February, and I've got 1 composite filling to remove, and I'm hoping that's going to sort it all out again. So that
what part do you think you're sensitive in the Ceremco fillings?
I'm sensitive to everything because I've got mast cell issues. Sure. My tryptase levels were raised. Mast cells are the engine of your allergy system. And so when you have trouble with them...
But they're still reacting because of metal fragments?
React to everything. Okay. It makes you allergic to everything. It's not just a metal thing going on with me at the moment.
Do you think that's because your immune system was just hyper reactive to the metals for so long? It stayed in this go.
Bone cement does that. It's not just the alumina in the bone cement. But PMMA bone cement, they have some pretty bad symptoms. They do cause cardiac issues. And so it's probably what's caused me cardiac issues.
Have you done any kind of limbic system retraining or anything along with management of your symptoms and allergies?
No, just keeping my vitamin C lower than normal levels because I can't tolerate the symptoms if I have vitamin C levels within normal range.
Let me stop you for 1 second because this may be new information to podcast guests. It is said in the metal allergic community that if you take vitamin C with a meal that's high in nickel or high in metals, that it kind of stops the absorption of the metals. You probably know more about vitamin C than I do in your particular instance, but you keep it low because...
to disable my detox process of my body.
Okay.
Basically, vitamin C plays a big role in the detox process of your body. That's why they tell you to take high dose vitamin C to detox. Problem is, if I detox, it causes symptoms really bad. I get pain, organ pain under both ribs, and I cannot tolerate the symptoms. Because of having low vitamin C, it means the moons, the half moon things on you, they've vanished. They've disappeared from me. I don't have any anymore because I've got low vitamin C. I also have candida in my mouth permanently because I've got low vitamin C, but I cannot tolerate the symptoms otherwise.
So what's your plan going forward to avoid all the metal as you mature? I mean,
the problem is metals, usually they start corroding anyway, somewhere between year 12 and year 20. Those fragments of metal on my back have been there for 20 years now. They can't be removed, but they aren't causing me a problem at the moment. I've not got any titanium symptoms at the moment. None at all. It's just the bone cement. But do you think I can get a doctor or a specialist? They don't want to get involved.
This brings to the point, every metal allergy patient's worst nightmare. You can't ever get a shoulder or a knee or a pacemaker or a stent. Do you think about that?
I don't want any of those things anyway. Even though I've had a lot of things go wrong in my life like this, I've still learned a lot. And I feel as though I've been successful in life. And if I died tomorrow, I'd be happy.
Well, you do a lot of advocacy work. For those who don't know, we're going to have Mark back on the podcast for another episode to talk about a whole bunch of things we didn't talk about tonight. But Mark does a ton of advocacy work for metal allergies and is really not shy about speaking up. And I'm super grateful that you have chosen to come on the podcast to share this very difficult journey that you're still in the middle of with the podcast listeners. Not easy to talk about. How do you feel like your mental health is at this point?
It's the best it's been in the last few years anyway, because I was being hypersensitive to everything. It made me hypersensitive to my medications I was on as well. It made me hypersensitive to the seizure medication. Once I found out I didn't have that thing in there anymore, I stopped taking the seizure medication. And when I stopped taking that, I didn't have euphoria anymore. The hypersensitivity to that was causing the elevated emotions. And I turned out I didn't have epilepsy anymore either, which is fantastic. And I can lie on the couch all day now without being in pain.
Do you feel like doctors now believe you, or are you still hitting the wall?
They believe me, but they don't want to believe. They can't help me. They're like meat in the sandwich as well as patients. It's complicated.
That sums it up. We'll title this episode, It's Complicated.
Yeah.
I think we have probably covered it all for tonight, as much as we can get into without opening a whole other can of worms. But I'm, again, really grateful that you've come on to share your story. We'll have you back to share more about the medical system that you're dealing with and that we're dealing with and some of your experiences there. Really want to remind the podcast guests that we will put, I'm assuming, Mark, that you have pictures, some photographs that you can share and some imaging that we can share. We'll put that in the show notes, guys. There will be a link in the show notes for any pictures associated that Mark wants to share. We have a whole list on heavilymetal.com of resources. There's an email list that you can sign up for, so you won't miss anything coming down the pipe. But definitely go to heavilymetal.com, 2 L's in metalled. Make that one of your go-to resources, and then you can stay abreast for when Mark comes back and other things that we're going to upload, share, and feature. Any links that we talked about in the show notes. And of course, anybody...
Well, yeah, I did have a think about that, actually. I've never really been much into music before, but I thought I'd have to be Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It. Would have to be.
Of course. You know that's how I end my show.
Yeah.
Do you like them? Is that your favorite? Is that your favorite heavy metal band as well?
Yeah, probably would be. When I was younger, I listened more to like Led Zeppelin and The Doors and things like that. But I did listen to Twisted Sister.
So one funny story, since you did like Led Zeppelin, it's no secret to many people that I used to work in the music business with all the heavy metal bands, and I never asked for an autograph in my entire life, except for Jimmy Page.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
I wish I could tell you where that autograph is. I did have one somewhere in the annals of my rock archives. There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we will go ahead and close, and you can join the chorus of telling the medical industry that we're not going to take it anymore.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in today. Please don't forget to follow me on social media and to like, share, and subscribe. My primary mission is reaching out to others who may be suffering from hypersensitivity reactions to metal implants. and pointing them to resources that can assist with hope, help, and healing. If you know someone that suffers from a chronic illness, you might ask if they have any implanted metal hardware, and if they've ever had a reaction to jewelry or metals of any kind. Might not even be on their radar. Visit us at heavilymetaled.com, where you can find images and documentation relating to our show today, as well as a number of valuable resources and links to assist you on your own personal healing journey. Until next time, keep on rocking.